Hi everyone, welcome to today's session, Start Your Photography Journey. We've got Vikesh taking us through an incredible kind of hour and a half, and he's going to teach us some of those important elements of how to shoot, how to get the right angles, and how to use an important app called Snapseed. So it's going to be a session which you'll get kind of those questions answered. I really recommend that you ask Vikesh if you're not understanding something, if you'd like it slowed down or you'd like clarification. So use your voice to shout out. If you're not feeling comfortable, as always, just write it in the chat there, and I will kind of vocalize that to Vikesh. Everything of this session is available on the G Drive. That will be uploaded by Monday, so you'll have the recording and you'll also have the slides from today. So don't worry trying to get everything down. It will be available there for you. Anyway, that's all from me. Over to you, Vikesh.
All right, thank you, Liza. First of all, welcome everyone. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal of our nations here in Sydney. So basically, I'm from Sydney. I'm an alumni here now. I used to study Master of Management. With photography, it's been like more of like a hobby for me. I've been just learning by myself than going into any workshop or a course. It's just like I go to YouTube videos and just learn things by myself, right? So today's lesson is like, it's a very beginning thing. We're just going to look into the basics that could actually have some kind of impact on the photos you're taking, that could help you make your photos much better. So maybe if you can share the slide with us, Liza.
Sure thing.
All right. Are there two cover pages there?
Sorry?
Do you want to slide show it maybe? Like maybe
Yeah, sure.
You can just go to the right bottom corner there and just right bottom. And there's that slideshow option there. A bit to the left. Yep, the last one.
Are you talking about this
Last
one?
icon there. The fifth one, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth one. The last one. To your right. Yep, that one.
Okay.
All right, so that's Sydney, a photo I've taken. That's me, Vikesh Lalshrestha. All right, so let me help with the next slide. All right, so that's basically what we're going to do today. How many participants do we have? Do we have time to go through introduction of everyone, Liza?
We've got 19 people.
Okay, so let's just go through around by just, let's just say our name, where are we from, and how much do we know about photography. Let's do it that then. Would you like to take it on, Liza, and ask everyone one by one, or does everyone just go?
Let's see if we're able to just kind of introduce ourselves. Try and even, maybe we can do it, maybe easiest if we do it in alphabetical order, because everyone can then know where they are in line. So who wants to start off first?
I think everyone is feeling shy. Maybe you should call out their names.
Okay, let me start. I'm Charuka here. I'm from Sri Lanka. So I have been also done photography as one of my best hobbies since my school time. So I'm keep enjoying that, and that's why I'm participating here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kate, we'd love to hear from you. So just
I can unmute.
Yeah.
Yep, sorry.
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Kate. photography is certainly a hobby of mine. I'm absolutely terrible at it though. So anything I can learn will be absolutely wonderful.
Fantastic. And Melody.
Yes, hi. Of course, I'm Melody. I'm from Melbourne, originally from Sri Lanka as well. So I love photography, and I'm terrible as well. I can manage though, but I would love to learn the proper techniques, and that's what is very interesting, and that's why I joined the program today. Thank you.
Great. Shakina.
Hey everyone, I'm Shakina. I live in Noosa, Sunshine Coast, Queensland. I'm from Canada originally, and I've been doing photography as a hobby for probably at least 10 years now. I know a little bit about ISO and shutter speed and aperture, but yeah, no really other details. So I'm looking to just grow my knowledge and skills and actually remember all the different settings and how they work.
You should know most of the things that I'm going to talk about today then.
We'll see.
Great, it could be a bit of a refresher as well. Yeah. And Naomi.
Hi, I'm Naomi. I'm in Brisbane. I am very much a point and shoot, so I'd like to get some skills to make more quality photographs.
Excellent. Lindsay?
I'm Lindsay, I'm in Melbourne. I occasionally pick up my iPhone and take really bad photos, but I'd really like to be able to just take some basic photos that are worth looking at and provide a record of different things that happen.
Yeah, excellent. And Vivek? Hold on, Vivek, you're on mute.
Hi everyone, this is Vivek. I'm from Sydney and I have been doing photography since many years. And I know something about Snapseed, Lightroom, but I want to know further more about ISO and aperture and all those things today. So I'm looking forward for it.
You should know most of that.
Yeah, probably. Let's see what happens in today's session.
Excellent. And Shanuka?
Oh, Lisa, I have been introduced myself at first.
Oh, sorry, you were first. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Louisa, if your mic is working. Okay, we'll move on.
Louisa introduced herself in the chat.
Okay, fantastic. Hard juggling, bit of both. We've also got Anish, living in Sydney, and has some basic photography knowledge, and Keen had taken 15 basic photography course back in Nepal. Ariel knows a little about photography, like to know more. And Bonnie from Rockhampton started photography hobby with a film camera a couple of years ago. And Matea in Albury, New South Wales. And Wani.
Hi, I'm Wani from Melbourne. So I learned basically photography as a fine arts subject, but with other commitment and other life commitment, almost forgot all the theories and techniques and procedures. Then I wanted to know about the theories and techniques again to get in the chat again. Thanks.
Excellent. And Charlemagné, sorry if my pronunciation is really, really poor.
It's okay. It's Charlie for short. I've been shooting for 1 year now. I'm studying, by the way, in Sydney, but currently I'm in the Philippines. So I've been shooting for 1 year now. And in this session, I'm most interested in the composition part. Thank you.
Fantastic. Sounds like a bit of knowledge there. Is there anyone else who'd like to add anything? Otherwise, I'll hand it back to Vikesh.
Alrighty then, thank you very much everyone for the introduction. So I love the fact that we have so many people from so many different places. It's good to know all of you. So basically the workshop today is about composition. We were basically going to look into how can we make the composition or how the image looks as a whole, how can we make it better, some tips for that. Then we're going to go into exposure triangle, which is basically if you're planning to go into a DSLR someday, that's like the basic thing you should know. That's where you start from, right? And then we're going to go into editing in Snapseed, which is basically a mobile app. So if you guys have time, you can just download it now, like right now. It's not a big deal. And then we have a closing, we'll have questions and answers. So let's go to the next slide, Lisa. Is it Lisa or Liza? I'm always confused.
Yeah, Liza.
Liza, okay. Okay, so basically, what's composition in images, right? So composition is basically how the image looks. So whenever you're taking a picture, there are elements in the image. There may be trees, there may be people, there may be stones, there may be rocks, or anything. Those are like the elements of any image or photograph, right? So composition basically means where to place them so that they will look pleasing to your eyes. Now, going a little back to history kind of stuff, people have always somehow tried to define beauty in terms of numbers or somehow quantifiable beauty. Although we say that beauty is in beholder's eye, somehow scientists and artists have been able to find out things here and there to make things look beautiful, which is basically golden ratio rule. This is something that you could see all around nature, which makes nature look beautiful. For example, like shells of a snail. If you look into it, you will see this thing. It's kind of complicated, but a simpler form of the golden ratio rule is the rule of thirds, right? So if you can go to the next slide, Liza. So rule of third is basically dividing your whole image into 9 boxes with the help of 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines. And it is believed that if you place your subject in any of these 2 vertical lines or in the point of intersection of these 2 lines, then your image somehow looks much more pleasing to the eyes, right? If you go to the next slide, Liza. Yep, that one. So if you can see in this, yep, next slide please. So if you can see in these images, we can see how the rule of thirds have been used. You can actually see it in most of the movies, like on the top right corner of the James Bond movie, or any movie you go out to see. Notice it whenever you have time, you will notice that somehow they place it in the rule of thirds. It's not necessary all the time, but that's like the basic rule for the composition you can use in your day-to-day life just to make things look beautiful. It is also very true with any landscape photography you're doing. Like if you're placing the horizon in the dead center, it doesn't look that pleasing, right? But if you only move the horizon a little bit to the top third or the lower third, like you can see in the bottom right corner with the lighthouse kind of thing, the horizon is placed in the lower third, right? So if only you could place the subject like that, it makes you look much more pleasing. Also, when you're taking like a photograph of a single person, like the child at the bottom, it's somehow pleasing to place your eyes in the intersection point or in the upper third level. So that's basically the rule of third. Let's have an experiment right now, right? Everybody has a camera on their phone. Take a picture of something in front of you, book, cup, paper, and try and do this. Let's try and follow the rule of third, and let's see if we can get any pictures out here. Post them in the chat, or just share them on your screen if you can. This rule of third, that is basically you place your subject on the third line. I mean to say, on the third quarter of the whole image. All right. Anybody wants to share their image?
So it could be easy if you want to put your photo just up to kind of your screen
Yeah.
on your computer, just to make it easier. If we all do it at once, then it's less scary. Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Vivek.
All right. I actually cannot see everyone, but I hope Lisa, you can see them. Yep.
Great. Yeah, Shakina.
That's nice. I can see the picture. Yep. That's nice, Kate. That's nice, Sakina. I cannot see the others. I'm sorry about that. I can only see like Kate, Sakina, Melody, Naomi, and Lindsay. So I'll just stick to that, and Lisa will help with someone else. All right. So that's basically the rule of third, basically, which means that placing your subject or your point of interest in the third part. Like if you can see me, I'm not at the dead center right now. I'm somehow in the third of the screen, right? So that's a way, just a simple basic rule to make your composition look better. If we can go to the next slide, Liza. Yep, the next one is the leading lines, which is basically trying to figure out some kind of lines that is pointing to your subject of interest. Like as you can see in both of the figures, in the first one you can see the lines from the footpath and from the railing kind of stuff. They are pointing towards the subject, right? Similar in the second picture also same. The lines from the bricks, they are somehow pointing towards my subject of interest. So you might have to do a little bit of work moving around your subject to find those lines, but that is a very good way to actually make your point of interest come to the eye when someone looks into a picture for the first time. So that's another way of making your image look better, a little bit of trick with the composition. Now, if you go to the next slide, photography is also a lot about angles. You know, most of the time we just take out our camera and just shoot dead ahead, whatever sees from our eye level. But sometimes if you try to change the angle, you know, maybe go a little bit low, maybe go a little bit up high, it makes a lot of a difference. Like if you can see in the second image, the person seems like hanging off a wall there, right? In the second image, can you see that? It seems like he's hanging off that wall. But the real fact is that he's actually lying on the ground. I just went down to get that picture. It's like a tunnel going on, and he's just lying on the ground in the second image, which makes it look like as if he's actually hanging off the wall, right? So that's basically what angles means, going high, low, by the sides, just to see different angles, because you never know which angle might look better. Now, as we go to the next slide, oops, there should be another image before that. Is there? No? Okay, let it be. The other thing that I want to talk about was lighting. Basically, lighting is, although composition makes an image look better as a whole, but without a proper lighting, it looks really dull. Like if you don't have enough lighting, or if you have just too much of lighting, it looks dull. So lighting is something you need to look into, which you can actually manage with your phone too, because a lot of phones have a pro mode these days. You can manage it from that. We'll go to that later. But basically, you need to look into where the light is better. Like for example, if you're taking a picture at night in front of, let's say, the opera house here, instead of just placing the subject in a dark place, maybe take the subject and put it somewhere where there is a light bulb or a lamp, so we can see the subject better. All right, so that's basically the basic things about the composition I wanted to talk about. Now, I just wanted to have a test here. We have two images, image A and image B. I would like you guys to write down in the chat box which of the things that I just studied about the composition is followed in these two images. All right, let's type down in the chat box. So which rules does B follow? All right. I guess you guys get what I mean to say. Yep, so basically as you guys have already figured it out, in the first image I just tried to place both of my subjects in the thirds, rule of thirds, and in the image B I just tried to somehow point all those lines from the building towards my subject. You can also see that her eyes are at the third level, so it's also following the rule of third out there. So that's basically the rule of third. You just try to place your subjects at the rule of third, your eyes at the third level, just to make it a bit more pleasing. All right then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your answers. Now let's go to the next slide. All right, so basics to the camera settings. So I guess most of us has a good phone with us, and most of these phones these days have a pro mode where you can actually go and control these. Most of you guys might not have an aperture control, like a Samsung S9 Plus has 2 aperture settings. We'll go into that soon, but you will surely find ISO and shutter speed with any of your mobile phones these days, right? So that's a basic triangle, exposure triangle. If you go to the next slide, so this is basically, I wanted to show you guys how a camera works or how a camera is made. So as you can see from going from left to right, at the left there is a sensor that actually captures the image, right? Before the sensor there is a shutter that opens up and closes according to the timing we provide. Before that there is an aperture, which is basically a hole that passes the light, the amount of light that you actually want to go in through the shutter to the sensor. The aperture controls the amount of light going in and out. And it is in the lens, then there is our image or subject in the rightmost place, that is the apple, right? So that's basically how a camera looks like. Now if you go to the next slide, this is the exposure triangle that I wanted to talk to you guys about. It contains of ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. So what is ISO? You remember the screen at the leftmost part? The sensor, the sensor. So basically ISO means what is the sensitivity of the sensor to the light. We can choose that actually. That is an ISO, which can range from 100 to 25,600 for this image right now, right? And similarly there is aperture, as I said, that's like the opening at the front, which actually opens up and closes according to our need of light for the image. Then there is shutter speed, which is in front of the sensor, which is basically like a block in front of the sensor, which opens up and closes as we press on the click. What do you call that? I forgot the name. But basically when you click an image, that opens up and shuts itself. And that's how the image is recorded in the sensor. Right? Does that make sense? It's kind of confusing at first if you are hearing this for the first time, but that's basically what an exposure triangle looks like, right? So ISO is measured from like 100 to a higher number. Similarly, aperture is measured in terms of a reciprocal, like a ratio thing, f by 32, f by 1.4. So if you go to 1.4, it is the widest, where the aperture opens the biggest. And as you go to f32, it just goes smaller and becomes small, right? And the shutter speed is like how fast you want to open it and shut it down. So 1 by 4 seconds means you're actually opening up the shutter for the 4 seconds before it closes itself. And similarly, 1 by 8,000 seconds means it just opens and closes so fast. Like by 1 by 8,000, it is very, very, very fast, right? So that's basically, again, shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and this is a triangle. Now, how they are related to each other, right? I hope you guys have understood what an ISO, aperture, and shutter speed is. Any questions? Anyone is confused? All good? Okay, so basically the relations between these is that, let's start with ISO, right? Maybe we should go to the next slide and I'll teach you or talk to you about that from there. So as you can see from this image, different ISO numbers are given at the bottom: 800, 1600, 3200, 6400, and 25,600. So as we go into the darker lights, as we are deprived of light, we need to increase the ISO to make our image look much more brightful. Right? As you can see there, in 800, the same image is very dark, but if you go to 25,600, the same image looks a bit brighter. But while we do that, the negative side of this is as we go to a higher ISO, we get a lot of noise, or we call it grain. So basically, if you zoom into this image, which you can't do right now, but if you zoom into this image, as we go to the 25,600, you can see like grains, like dots on the images, which is not so much pleasing. So a basic rule is we try to keep the ISO as less as possible. Right? Now let's go to the next slide. Aperture. As I was talking about the aperture, it's basically the hole that lets in the light, and you can increase or decrease the size of it. As you can see the range there from 1.4 to f22, which is like f1.4 is the largest hole, and as you go to f22, the whole amount of light going into the camera decreases. This thing affects the depth of field. What is depth of field? It basically means how blurred is your background in basic terms, right? So if you can see in the images at the leftmost part, the house behind the man is blurred, which means if you let a lot of light to get into it, light is increasing the size of the aperture, you get that background blur. We also call it a shallow depth of field, or basically more depth of field is there in the left image. As you go to the right image, there's a shallow depth of field, or basically the background is not that blurred. Which basically means that if you're trying to take portraits, maybe like picture of a person, you might have to go with a bigger aperture just to create that background blur. But if you're going out in the landscape and you want to take a picture of a hill or an ocean or sea, you want everything to be on focus. You might not want to have it like that depending upon the situation, but if you want everything to be in focus and there is no like background blur, you just go with a smaller aperture size. Right? So that's about aperture. As we go to the next one is the shutter speed. So shutter speed is, as I said, for how long are we just opening and closing that shutter when we are pressing our click button. As you can see from this image that with 1/5 of a second, which is a bit confusing for you guys right now, but that basically means the camera is just opening for 1/5 of a second. The shutter is only opening for a 1/5 of a second. This is an image where the wind is blowing, right? So see the two differences in 1/5 second and 6 seconds. When the aperture opens for 6 seconds, you can see the grass is being blurred out there. That is called a motion blur. So if an image is moving, we are trying to make sure that we are just opening the shutter for a small time so that we could just capture the small moment of the motion out there. So basically with shutter speed, your motion blur is connected. So if you can help me to go to that triangle image, Liza, at the top.
Going back a few slides.
Yep, with the triangle that thing. Yep, so this one, as you can see here, ISO is attached with the grains. So you need to make sure, you need to balance that. Then again, shutter speed is related to sharpness, or basically if something is in motion, we need to balance the shutter speed. Similarly with the aperture, it affects the depth of field. So whenever you're starting to take a picture, start with one. Like if you're taking an image in a very dark environment, maybe you should start with ISO and manage aperture and shutter speed according to that. If you're going to take any picture of sports or a bike ride, you might start it with the shutter speed and balance the shutter speed and manage the aperture and ISO based on that. Similarly, if you're looking for a portrait with a really good background blur, maybe start with aperture and manage ISO and shutter speed according to that. So basically these three are related to make your image look how it looks. Right? So this is all about experimenting and going that out and just trying this. It is very good to actually do this with a mobile phone if you are ever planning to go with a DSLR, because that's what I did. You know, like I started with a simple mobile phone and now I actually have a DSLR, which is making me very like, I'm used to a DSLR even without using it because I was doing all of this in my mobile phone. So maybe try this thing out and see if you can actually get great images just by, just go and try on the Pro mode in mobile phone. You learn a lot from that. All right, so let's now go to the test part of the slide. We did 3 slides later. All right, so again, 2 questions. Let's say the first one is A, second one is B. Let's type in our answers in the chat box. So what should be the shutter speed when you want to take picture of a moving bike? Right, just forget about the aperture and ISO for now. Let's just focus on shutter speed. The shutter speed should be higher or lower. Similarly with the second one, what should be the aperture size if you want a blurred background? Should the aperture be big or should it be small? How do I do this? All right. Yep, higher speed to avoid the motion blur. I heard from Bomi, low aperture. So the number is low because it's f by 1.4. So this is a confusing part where most people get confused. Aperture 1.4 is a low, but the size of the aperture is actually big when it's 1.4, whereas when it's 22, it's actually small. It's kind of confusing for the first time, but I guess you guys are getting what I mean to say. On instead 1.4, that's exactly what we want. Higher speed of shutter for bike, and lower, that's 1.4, which means actually it's big for blur. All right then, I guess you guys have understood this part too. If there's any question, I'm ready to take it. Any questions from everyone? Anyone? Just feel free. Yeah, like it's okay if you don't understand it for the first time. You can just ask it. There is no right or wrong here. So if you are confused with any part, just ask. Okay. I guess I'm a very good teacher then. Everybody understood in the first time. All right, so what do we have next? I think we're going to Snapseed for the next one. So basically there are plenty of apps out there and Snapseed is just an example. Lightroom is a very good app, although you have to pay for it and there aren't much features you can use while free, but still Lightroom is a very good app to play with lights and to change how your image looks. So I'm just going to share my mobile phone right now. Give me a sec. All right, 3194096. So can you let me in, Lisa? All right, so can you guys see my mobile screen right now? Cool.
Yep.
Where is Snapseed? Alrighty. Let's open up an image. Which one shall we go with? Maybe let's just try this one. So this is an image that I actually took during a sunrise. It's really out of lighting, although it has a little bit of composition here and there. I've tried to place the horizon on the upper third, but the image is really bad, right? Because it doesn't have proper lighting. So I'm going to try and see how I can make this image look much better. You can actually use all of this already made filters out here to see how does it look, but I like to do it manually, and I'm just going to show you guys how to do it manually. All right, so basically we go to tools. There are different tools here. Tune image is basically you manage the lightings or the exposure, basically how bright or how dark you want to do with tune image. You can do that. With the details, you are just going to make your images look much more clear to pop out of the skin. And then curves. I'll go through a few of these. There are a lot of things. I don't think we will be using all of them in all of the images, but I'll take you through the basics, right? So let's go to tune image. I would like a little bit of more brightness. Let's go to the shadows first and increase the shadows to see everything. Then brightness a little bit. Contrast is basically, so in order to explain contrast, it's basically difference between two colors. You know how, like if you take out the contrast, as you can see, everything looks flat. If you increase a little bit of contrast, it gives that color depth to both colors. So I like to have that. Saturation is basically how colorful you want to get things done. I want a little bit of more color in the sunrise. Ambience just brightens up the shadows and this makes everything look much more brighter. Highlights. Highlights is basically the amount of light. I would like it to be a bit less. Warmth is basically, do you want your image to feel a bit cooler or a bit warmer? If you go down, you can see it turns into blue and gives that cool feeling. When you go on the right side, it gives you a bit of a warm feeling. And I want a little bit of warmth in this image, right? Now, I would like to crop it a bit so that we don't have a lot of like land on very less of the sky. Let's just crop it a little bit to give it more good size. Again, I'm trying to put the horizon on the third just to make it look much more better. All right, once this is done, I'm going to go to details and give it more details, but we need to make sure that when you give too much of details, you start to get this kind of noise. So you don't want that happening. You just want it a little bit just so that it pops out. That's done. Then we go to curves. Mostly I use S curves. They somehow help to make your subject pop out, you know, like, let me just do this. This is called S curve because it looks like an S. You see, you can do like this, but that's too much. You just want it a little bit of the S curve. This is basically, I'm playing with the highlights and shadows, which basically means the light and the shadows. So
when would you most often use the S curve, Bikesh? And in what kind of instances? When would you most often use that S curve? When would you think it's the most appropriate?
I would mostly use it when you want, mostly with this kind of sunset and sunrise, or if you want your, you know, like image or subject of interest to be a bit darker to give that contrast between your background and your subject. That's mostly when we use the S curves. For this one, it's more of a landscape one. I want the blacks to pop out. That's why I'm trying an S curve here. Now, once that's done, you can maybe rotate image according to your wish, but I think we have a good horizon, so we don't need much of a rotation. This should be all right. Then you also have the image option to expand the images, which I don't like, but sometimes it might be useful if you want something, like if you want the sky to be a bit higher, you can just extend it like this. It just copies whatever is in the screen. It's not so good, but you can try it sometimes whenever you might need it. There are also other tools like selective where you can actually particularly highlight a particular area, you know, like let's try this. What do we have here? So basically, let's say I just want this bottom stone to be a bit brighter. are you? Like the brightness of the bottom one. Can you see the difference from there? Like if you look at the bottom right corner, the brightness of the bottom right corner is increasing and nothing is happening to the upper side, right? Similarly, I can go with shadows, not saturation. Do we have shadows? No, contrast, structure, brightness, or saturation. You see how that stone at the right bottom corner. So that's basically how you can select a particular part of the image and just work on that, especially like when you are, let's say you are taking an image of a person in a dark environment. You like the background being dark, but you want your subject or the main person to be brightened. You can use something like the selective to choose the face of the person and just increase the light in that face. And there are a lot of other functions and tools you can use. I won't go into all of them for now, but I do love to use this HDRscape, which basically makes everything brighter and makes everything much more colorful. So let's put it there, right? So if you want to see the difference, just click on it and hold on it. So that's how it looked before. This is how it looks now. Can you see the difference? All right, so that's basically how you use Snapseed. It's a very easy app to use. You can find a lot of video tutorials in YouTube too. And this is what I mostly use whenever I'm posting like photos in Instagram and stuff. So that's all from Snapseed for you guys. So do you guys have any questions up to now regarding anything? No? All good? I'm the best teacher?
I've got a question.
Yeah?
If you save the image that you've changed, do you have two images there, or does it delete the first actual original image?
You will have both the images there. You can actually save it or download the edited one as a separate image.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else from anyone else?
Yeah, just got a question here from Anish. Can you please tell us something about metering modes? Also, how can we keep the subject, the people, dark just like the shadow and background clear? Also, when there is high exposure difference between the subject and the background, how can we correct it?
So I think you're basically talking about the highlight and shadow stuff. What happens with our camera is either it focuses on a part that's in the shadows, or either it's called a dynamic range actually. So with normal cameras, we don't have a dynamic range. So basically, if you are focusing in something that's on light, it just focuses everything on that, and the darker part just get too dark. Or if you go to a darker part and try to take an image of someone who's in the dark, the background which is in light, it just gets blown out and it just looks really terrible. A way to balance that is maybe try to just take a picture in the shadows, or just try to take the picture in the highlights or in the light, where there is light, where there is sunlight. That way, that problem could be solved. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that sounds like it did.
All right, and basically I think with the metering mode thing, it's more about like exposure thing, I guess. So basically with the exposure, we have a meter which goes to a negative side and which goes to a positive side. Basically, if you go to the negative, it just makes everything darker, and if you go to the positive side, it just makes everything too much bright. So a good idea is to look into the metering mode and place it in the middle. So for the beginning, that's a very good way. I don't think we have it with mobile phones, but even some of them have it. But if you go to a DSLR or anything, you can always see like a bar, like a ruler at the bottom. And depending upon your choice, sometimes you might want things to be a bit dark, so you just go to the dark side and make it darker. But a good way to start is just place it at the middle, so you have a good exposure. All right, anything else from anyone else?
Is anyone interested in trying Snapseed with a photo and working through it?
Trying that now.
All right. Nice. Are you using like a double exposure there? Or, oh no, it's just an image. Okay. I thought like that was a double exposure thing. We can actually do a double exposure too from Snapseed, where you basically bring in two images and put them together. Like you can take an image of a person and put a building on his body. You can also do something like that.
So, Bikesh, where do we find the aperture and ISO on our phone? Are you able to take us through that? That's from Louisa.
Yep. So let me just, it's different for different phones, but let me take you through mine. I'll have to share my screen again. 831. Can you let me in again, Liza? Stop. All right, so if you go to your camera and more or wherever you have this pro setting, as you can see in the first one, there are different settings. Go to the pro setting. And as you can see at the bottom here, there is ISO, then there is aperture and shutter speed setting. The manual thing is for, what was this? Yeah, this is basically for the temperature contrast trend. You can change it according to your choice. It's too dark. So basically ISO, I try to keep it as low as possible depending upon the light so that we don't get that noise thing that we talked about. Let's keep it like 100. Then the second icon, we can manage shutter speed and aperture for this mobile. In most of the mobile phones, you might only be able to change the shutter speed. As you can see in the bottom left corner, I can change it from 1.5 to 2.4. And as you can see, as I make it 2.4, it gets darker. As I make it 1.4, it gets brighter. You can see better difference after changing the shutter speed. Let's say like this one. See, with 2.4, it gets darker. With 1.5, it gets brighter, which basically means I'm opening and closing the aperture size. With mobile phones, there is only two sizes for Samsung S9 Plus. With DSLR, you have higher ranges. And basically, this is how you control your shutter speed. And as the shutter speed change, you can see the image getting darker and brighter. Yep, we also have a manual focus here, where basically I can change the focus. Let's say this is when I can focus on the screen here, or I can focus on the screen there. See, that's how you can change the focus and make your background blur if you have your subject really near to you. I hope that answers your question.
So Bikesh, we've got actually an excellent question here in regard to lighting. So Bommy's asked, how do you manage the light when you take portraits and the sun is just behind the object?
That's a very good idea to take a silhouette, like silhouette, well, how do you pronounce that? If you want a silhouette picture, like silhouette. So if you want that thing, that is very good idea, because if you point your camera directly towards a source of light, anything that's in front gets darkened out, right? So if you want to take a picture where that is not happening, where your subject is not being a silhouette, change your angle. Instead of shooting towards the sun, ask your subject to be in this side and let the sunlight fall on their face and then take the picture. Or maybe just move them to a little bit of side where maybe the sun is coming from the side and directly into the camera. There's not we can actually do about it. We have to change the angle for that. All right, what else do we have?
So Bikesh, Anish says that he can see in the DSLR that there are multi-center spot, entire screen, AVG and highlight metering mode. Can you please tell him about the use of each, where to use these settings, as he doesn't know about it?
I'm not exactly sure about what he's talking about. Are you talking about the focus points, the center points, side points, or?
Yeah, that's correct.
Can you please about the use of it? I think it's more about like which point you want to focus on while you're taking an image. Like, do you want to focus on this part, or do you want to focus on this part? Depending upon that, you can actually change that square dot and take it to different part of the screen to focus on that part. I think that's what it's using. I'm not exactly sure if that's what you're talking about. You can look, honestly, if you want to know more, you can always contact me later on and we can talk about it, because I think that's something that most people wouldn't understand right now because it's very basic. So yeah, you can always contact me later on and we can have a talk about it. Anything else?
Matthias said, don't have those advanced settings for iOS, shutter speed, etc. on my phone. Is there a camera app that I could use?
There is actually. You can actually use the software called Lightroom. I think you can take photos from the software itself, and you can use the Pro mode where you can change all the settings, and also it helps you take raw images. So basically, a raw image is a format that actually most DSLR camera has it. Phones do not have it, but the app named Lightroom, L-I-G-H-T-R-O-O-M, Lightroom, that helps you to actually take raw pictures, which means that you can play more with the colors. So Lightroom is a very good app. There was another app, I forgot the name exact, but if you basically type in like in Google or anything, you'll find it. There are lots of apps for that. Adobe Lightroom, yeah, that's the one. The question, what is your camera and favorite lens? Okay, for now, I only have one camera, so it's Sony a6400, although it's like not a full frame camera. Again, that's a different part of full frame and crop sensor are different thing. But that's what I'm using right now, a6400, and for now, my favorite lens would be the 35mm lens, which is a portrait lens. And you can see it in my Instagram. Maybe you should share my social media, which is at the last of the screen.
Do you want to do that? I don't have your social media.
It should be at the last of the presentation slide. It's not there? Is it not? Which lens do you suggest to buy for overall photography for full frame Sony camera? I don't think there is a particular lens that actually can be used for overall everything. Maybe just use your kit lens. I think that's the lens to start with for everything. But it actually depends upon what do you want to take picture of. So do you want to go out with landscape photography or portrait photography? That defines what kind of lens do you need. Like I'm doing portrait photography these days, so I'm only focused on like portrait lens. Again, with Sony full frame lens, it's very expensive, I know. That's why maybe you're trying to get a single lens that works for everything. But I think the kit lens is the only option for you. Because except than that, it depends on what you want to take picture of. Lenses are different according to that. All right, so that's my Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook in the chat. You can have a look around, like, comment, subscribe, follow, help me get famous. All right, anything else?
What is the most common mistakes made by amateur photographers? What do you often see and you're like, oh my God, 101, what not to do?
Again, it's all about composition. Like even with this screen, I like to let me give you an example. And this here, it looks all right? What if I was somewhere like this, just like that, in the corner somewhere, and just like this, somewhere here where you can only see my head and nothing else. This doesn't look that good, right? So I think composition is one of the best things someone can work on who's just starting. How to even if you don't have proper lighting and settings and exposure and everything, if only you are somehow able to get a good composition, then you can manage those kind of stuff in post-processing, as editing through different software. So I think composition is something that one should work on at the beginning.
Fantastic. We've just got another question here. Does anyone use Nikon 750D? That might probably just be a question for the chat, actually.
Yeah.
And how do we apply all the learnings from today into an SLR? Do we just experiment, or what would be the best way to go on from here?
I think it's about experimentation. It's about practice. Just go out there and shoot stuff. You don't have to post it in social media to show it to anyone. Just take a picture and share it with your friends, or share it with me. I can help you or comment on what could have been better, something like that. It's all about experimenting. It's all about practice. The exposure triangle thing, the more you practice, the more you get better at it. That's how it is. It's kind of confusing at the beginning, but as you keep on using it, it's just there in your subconscious mind, and you don't have to think about it. Okay, I have to do this. It just happens automatically. So it's all about practice. Well, there's a chat somewhere where someone was talking about taking dark photos. I couldn't read everything. What's there, Liza?
So Melody asked that she's taken some very important photos from a camera and forgotten to put on the night mode, and all the photos are dark. Can you change them to see the picture properly?
Yep. So if you really want to get a good quality, then you might use something like a Lightroom or Photoshop maybe, just to make them. It's all about increasing your shadows and whatever I just did with the picture out here. Like, as you could see that it was very dark in the beginning, and later on it was a bit good, right? So basically you can do that from softwares like Lightroom and Photoshop.
Vikesh, is Adobe Lightroom, is that, I have an Apple Mac. Is that something that I could download and put onto my Mac and use as a photo editor?
Yes, you can do that. Actually, it costs you, if you're a student, it's going to cost you less, but you have to buy that software, I guess. There are also other free softwares like, there is DaVinci, Cinematic, something. I don't exactly remember the names, but there are free softwares too, which you can use to actually work on the exposure of the image. But Lightroom and Photoshop are one of the best. You can always go out and look for a pirated version, although not suggested, but you can do that too. But yeah, Lightroom and Photoshop are the best softwares out there for this kind of editing. Lightroom is basically something that helps you to work with the lights. So you want to change the color or the shades of red or blue, or you want to make the image look much more brighter or less brighter. Lightroom helps you with that. Photoshop is more of like a photo manipulation tool, like if you want to remove the spots from your skin, you want to look your body a bit taller or smaller, you can do those kind of stuff from Photoshop.
Okay, thank you.
There you go, free trial of Photoshop for 7 days. Alrighty, anything else? No? All right then, that should be it from my side. I would like to hand it over to you, Liza.
Thanks, Vikesh. Wow, fantastic session. Really, really appreciate your time and your knowledge. You've obviously got a lot of experience and a lot of learnings behind you. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'm sure that there is going to be a need for everyone to review everything that we've gone through. So again, I'll just post in the chat here that G Drive. And I look forward to seeing everyone again. We've got 2 more sessions coming up for Skills and Thrills. If you're interested in learning guitar and how to play your first song, then jump on Monday. And our last session on Wednesday, Tax 101, how to do your tax return. So that will be it for Skills and Thrills, and it will be done for term 2. So hope you can join us then. But thanks again for joining today, and get in touch with Vikesh. He's a great resource. All of his social media in the chat as well on the slideshow.
Thank you.